Now let's get started. We are honored to have lead these discussions licensed attorney and professional fiduciary Darby Jones, a member of the Florida and Maryland Bar. Darby serves on the executive council of the Real Property Probate Trust Law section of the Florida Bar and is a registered professional guardian. Darby is also the founder and executive director of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida. Today, we're going to delve into potential financial pitfalls. Darby, what do we need to look out for as we prepare for our financial future?
Well, we've got to prepare for a lot, but the good news is at the end of the day, it's going to be a pretty simple process. So let's get started. Today, I want to also take a moment to make sure that we are part of the goal of Aging Academy is, of course, to be thought-provoking, important, and interesting content for all of you. So please, your comments are really welcome and important and will help for the planning of future episodes and subject matter. So please feel free to either chat today in the chat box or send emails or comments. They're very welcome. And I also want to thank the AARP of Florida for allowing this to happen. And as she mentioned, I'm here on behalf of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida, where we serve as a resource for finding professional fiduciaries that can serve in a variety of important capacities. But today we are going to talk about dangerous financial decisions. And to start, I want to start with just investments in general. And we got to understand that a lot of investment products and ideas are kind of geared towards the aging population. And that's why I think we need to be more armed with information so that we're not kind of led down a path of dangerous decision making. So if you have been watching this series from the beginning, you should be in pretty good shape so far with being relaxed and confident in a lot of decision making in other areas. And so today we're just going to add on that financial component. And again, any questions after this, feel free to contact me at your convenience. So we're going to take off the shiny wrappers that are distracting to many people about finances. In fact, it's not just those of us that are aging. And by the way, aging happens everywhere. We can't avoid it. It's as far as I know, it's in every time zone. So we're all facing that dilemma. And as a former estate planning attorney, trust officer, and professional fiduciary, I've had the opportunity to look at thousands of investment portfolios and information of many, many, many clients. And I want you to know that I am here today just as a fiduciary sharing with you my experiences. I am not intending this to be any kind of investment advice or any kind of legal advice. I just want to share with you some tips and situations that I've come across over the last 30 years that I think will be helpful for all of you here today. Most people, at least most people in my history, are reluctant to even look at their investment statements. In fact, many people don't even open the mail when they get their investment statements. And that can be for a variety of reasons. Usually it's because they don't really understand it anyway, or they open it up and they just want to look at that one number and make sure that one number is going up from month to month or quarter to quarter. And they just sort of assume or hope that their financial relationship or financial advisor is doing the right thing. So today I want to make sure that you know more than just looking at that one number on your statement. And if you are looking at just that one number or not opening your mail, I hope by the end of the day you're going to feel better about those decisions. So as far as I know, on the planet Earth, as we exist today, there is only 5 places that you can invest your money. You can invest your money in cash. You can invest your money in real estate. You can invest your money in stocks and bonds, or you can invest your money in commodities. So again, 5 things: cash, real estate, stocks and bonds, and commodities. And today, I'm going to ask you, as you can think in your mind, if I handed you $100,000 today, what would you do with that $100,000? Okay, you can either put it in a coffee can and bury it in your backyard in cash. You can invest in real estate, invest in stocks, bonds, or commodities. That's it. Now, commodities are pretty high risk. For those of you that don't understand commodities, it's like silver, gold, corn, things that are pretty volatile and pretty risky investments. I'm going to throw crypto in that category as well. Although I hope no one here is delving into the crypto market, I hope. So you have 5 things that you can invest in, and that's it. So you can go into any bookstore, if anybody has bookstores anymore, bookstore, and you can see a whole room full of books about how to diet, right? How to lose weight. There's all kinds of TV shows, YouTube channels, whatever it is, to tell you how to lose weight. And you can also go into a room, there's going to be books galore about how to invest your money, or how to make money, how to grow wealth, how to be more rich in old age. So if you look at the diet books, at the end of the day, the only thing you really have to do is eat less and exercise. All those books, if you boil it all down, it's really about eating less and exercising. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's just that simple. You go into that room with all the financial books, at the end of the day, there are only 5 things to invest in: cash, real estate, stocks, bonds, and commodities. And that's it. And we're going to take commodities off. Really only 4 things. So, okay, how do I buy a share of stock? If it's that simple, how do I find a share of stock? Well, I'm going to compare finding stock to shopping for groceries. And I'm going to share with you a picture of what I'm calling my beanie weenie speech. And I think Chandra's going to share a picture of my stash of beanie weenies if she can get it up here. But let's say you're looking for a can of beanie weenies to purchase. And I'm comparing this, for example, if you're looking for a share of Coca-Cola stock, right? But we're going to go into the grocery shopping world. You can buy a can of beanie weenies at 7-Eleven, right? Right down the street from where you live. It's open 24 hours a day. You can go there anytime. They're virtually in every corner. I'm assuming we have 7-Elevens across the country. If you don't, I'm talking about a 24-hour kind of Magic Mart kind of store. You can also go to the grocery store. You can go to and down here we have a huge chain called Publix. You can go to Publix grocery store, or Piggly Wiggly, or Winn-Dixie, or Aldi, or whatever grocery store chain you have, and you can find beanie weenies. You can also go to the gourmet food shop, like a Whole Foods type or a Trader Joe's, and get beanie weenies. You can also buy them online and have them delivered to your house. Or you could even go to Costco or Sam's Club and buy beanie weenies. Same can of beanie weenies. It's just a variety of ways where you can purchase them. Which can of beanie weenies is the most expensive? It's going to be that one at 7-Eleven. Okay, it's going to be the one at 7-Eleven because they have stores, bricks and mortar, people, trucks. They're open 24 hours. They've got 100% convenience, and you're paying for that. Which one is the least expensive can of beanie weenies? That's going to be Costco or Sam's Club. Now, again, you got to buy a whole case of them. And it's not the fanciest place, not open 24 hours a day, doesn't have all the bells and whistles. In fact, you probably have to pack your own box or bags. And you also probably have to be a member to get to those Costco beanie weenies. So if you translate that to buying a share of Coca-Cola stock, how do you know where to go? How do you know what investment relationship is the safest and most appropriate for you? And I will tell you today that your relationship with your investment advisor or financial advisor is probably one of the most important relationships in your life, especially now, as most of us are not in an income accumulating phase of our life. We're in a distribution phase of our life. We are utilizing what we have been able to save, which is, I think, an even more important decision making and strategy than accumulating, because there's tax impacts, especially today with our qualified accounts, our IRAs, our Roths, our 401ks are all very different, and the distributions out of those can have significant tax impacts. So the distribution or using of your investments can be a pretty important strategy. So that relationship that you have with your investment advisor is super important. And for those of you who may not have seen our first episode of Aging Academy, because it's so important, it was our first episode, is what is a fiduciary? We hear that word all over the place. Everybody's calling themselves a fiduciary nowadays. So if you have not seen that episode, I would recommend you go back and understand and get a feel of what fiduciary really means. In the world of investing, there are levels of fiduciary duty, just like there are levels of fiduciary duty in the real world. A bus driver is a fiduciary, a doctor is a fiduciary. I'm a fiduciary if I'm serving as a trustee or power of attorney. So there's all kinds of levels. In the investment world, there's two levels primarily. One is in the best interest of the client. They have a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. That's the highest level of fiduciary duty. Then there's a lower level. It's called suitability level. And that just means that the investment advisor or broker or whoever it is, whatever title they're going by, is really just required to pick out what's suitable for you. I'm going to read the definition. The suitability standard means a broker-dealer must have a reasonable belief that the investment transaction or frequency of transactions is merely suitable for the customer. So you have a choice whether you have an investment advisor that operates under that fiduciary duty or someone that operates under the best interest fiduciary duty. You have the Costco, you have the 7-Eleven, a lot in between. It's confusing, and I don't disagree. So be careful when you're selecting your financial relationship. And if you're in one now, you might want to reassess that relationship. And here's another story that kind of highlights this fiduciary duty or selection of someone important in your life. Let's say you're at the airport and you're waiting for 2 airplanes to fly to New York, okay? This pilot gets paid the same salary no matter when he gets to New York. This pilot gets $100 for every 10 minutes that he gets there early. So which plane would you like to get on? My hope is that we're all picking this one, right? I see Marilyn smiling. Yep, we're getting on this plane. And the reason is that this guy is going to not put you at risk or take any unnecessary risk in order to fill his pocket with $100. This person may also be safe and not take risks, but you don't know that because there's an opportunity. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest here. I'm not saying that every single one of these pilots that get incented to get there early is a bad guy. You just know that there's this opportunity that you might just wonder about. And that's sort of how investment relationships work. If your investment advisor is compensated by selling products, by commission base, by transaction base, I think you always kind of wonder, are they really making that decision in my best interest? And very often you're not shared the information of what the commission really is, and how much commission that person's really getting. And sometimes they don't even understand their commission schedules that well. So keep that in mind also when you're selecting your financial advisor. And here are some questions you want to ask. Ask them, are you a fiduciary? And have them answer that question and have them answer it, have them give a definition of what their fiduciary duty really is. How are they compensated? Follow the money. Ask them how their fees are made. All of them are going to make money. The pilot over here is making money. That doesn't make him a bad guy. But how they're compensated can shine a light, perhaps, on some possible conflicts. What is the total cost of your relationship with them? What are the average commissions? Sometimes in retail world, we go back to our grocery store, got the 7-Elevens, you got online, those are all kind of retail packaging. The Costco's are wholesale. Okay, so they don't have the middlemen, the commissions, the packaging, the shiny objects, the shiny wrappers. And that's why it's cheaper. So in the investment world, in the retail world, you have a lot of commissions and incentives and things that are happening behind the scenes that you're unaware of, that are maybe creating decisions, or they're calling you saying, buy this fund instead of that fund, because they may get a better incentive or not. Whereas in the wholesale world, for example, wealth management, or good old fashioned, what we used to call trust departments, they by law are not allowed to have commissions or be incented in any way. Because remember, they're at that fiduciary level that they must act in your best interest. And there's a lot of things that go on in that world that are for your best interest. So ask them how your relationship will work and what they're going to do on your behalf. Are they going to manage your portfolio? Many people assume that when they go to their broker and they're invested in 4 different mutual funds, that broker is managing those or watching those mutual funds. They're not. They're selling you that mutual fund at that moment in time. They're not watching to see whether that makeup of that mutual fund may take a dramatic change from a value fund to a growth fund, or the fund manager got moved to a different company or was fired for a particular reason. You're not paying them to manage. Over here in the wholesale world, they're going to be managing your account, and their fees are usually a flat fee. It's usually like a percentage of whatever they're managing. That way you know that they're not incented to buy and sell or transact, because they don't make money off the transactions. You're paying them for a professional relationship to manage your portfolio. They only make money if you make money. In the retail sector, very often they're making money whether you make money or not, because they're on a commission base. So in sum, I mean, we've talked about a lot of complex issues here, but the general takeaway that I want you to have is just be careful who you are working with, especially at this time of your life. Are they going to do some financial planning with you? Do they understand the withdrawals and the distribution impacts of retirement accounts? Because many of us, that's where our largest wealth is nowadays, is in retirement accounts. Stay away from insurance salesmen. Insurance is not an investment. Insurance products are not investments. And please stay away from people in banks. Now, there are trust departments as part of a bank. That's a separate and apart and wonderful place, because that's an asset management environment. But in the branches, if you're talking to a broker, be very careful of their advice, or the teller, or the person telling you to avoid probate. Don't get financial advice or investment advice from people in banks. They're not trained or equipped to give you the appropriate answers. Ask questions and do research. And there is a website, FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. They have a senior helpline. So if you do have questions about your financial advisor or what a good relationship might be for you, call that number. Okay, it's 844-574-3577. And they also have a link called BrokerCheck. And I think that's also it's going to be provided to you after this as well in the resource list. But it's called BrokerCheck. And that's a way you can put in your financial advisor's name and find out if there have been any complaints or issues in his or her career. So now let's move on to some specific products. Okay, these are the shiny objects that I want you all to not be too enamored with. Or if you are enamored with it, just be careful and do your research. First one that gets on my nerves are reverse mortgages. And a lot of times, if you're looking at late night TV, don't buy anything in any of those ads would be my first recommendation. But reverse mortgages can be extremely dangerous. They're very attractive and they're marketed very aggressively, but they are also a very expensive loan. In fact, they're probably one of the most expensive loans that you can get. And it's not an appropriate tool. I can't tell. Well, there have been many times where I have had the sad situation of a client who had gone to get a reverse mortgage on her home. It was her only asset left. She had run out of money. Her home was worth a substantial amount. So she felt, fine, I'll get a reverse mortgage. That means you're getting a loan against your own equity in your own home. You're giving away your equity in exchange for a loan. Well, then she spent all that. So now she's living in the home, but she has no money. The home is worth in excess of $1 million, but she has no money to do any repairs, no money to buy food. So she has no hot water. She's got plumbing leaks. The house is full of dust and mold, and she's eating by the grace of her neighbors. But she lives in a beautiful community. So the mistake here is, if you are at that point where you need funds, you're running out of money, and you have a home with equity in it, think about selling that home, using those funds to then downsize, or what they now call right size, and use the equity as your money to take care of you for your future years. Or if you have family, they and you would be far better off if you could arrange a family or personal loan with your family members. But reverse mortgages should be entered into with extreme caution. Long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance is also marketed very aggressively to people, of course. But the challenge with long-term care is very often you're going to overbuy. You're going to buy the Cadillac when in fact all you really need is maybe a Volkswagen, even though I like Volkswagens, but you may not need the Cadillac. It doesn't mean that all long-term care insurance policies are not great, but you need to be careful. Remember, there's only 5 things out there to invest in, okay? These products, when they're selling you these products, they're turning around, taking your money and investing in these 5 things, same 5 things. So when you buy a long-term care policy, what do you think they're doing with your premium payments? Okay. What do you think you could be doing with your premium payments? Investing. So back into long-term care. And if you saw the episode that we entitled Don't Put Me in One of Those Places, we talk a lot about the cost of long-term care and the cost of aging. And the average person, and these are just averages, on average, 1 in 4 people will end up in a nursing home. The average cost of a nursing home per year can be $75,000 to $100,000 a year. So if 1 in 4 people are going to end up, then the average cost is $100,000. You probably already have that. You've worked hard all your life. So many people are self-insured and able to pay for their long-term care without having to purchase a long-term care policy. Only 15% of the population are going to need long-term care longer than 2 years. So think about your own financial statement. And many of you really can self-insure your long-term care. Medicaid planning. If you do run out of money, there is what they call Medicaid. This is not Medicare. I'm talking about Medicaid. This is where the government will come in and pay for your long-term care. Every state administers Medicaid differently. So it really depends on what state in which you live. But there are certain tests in order to be eligible for Medicaid. One of those is an income test, and one of them is an asset test, and one of them is a physicality test. So the income, of course, you can't have over a certain amount of income per month. The assets, you can't own more than a certain amount of assets. The physicality test means you need to have care, that your physical being, your activities of daily living are impacted in such a way that you need the care. So it's available. So even if my lady in the house with no money, had I gotten to her before she passed, sadly, we could have gotten her Medicaid, clearly. Now, there's a question coming in about Medicare. I don't have time to go into the different types of Medicare. That's a good question, but that is sadly a little outside my scope today. I just wanted to touch on Medicaid because there are a lot of people that are confused about the difference between Medicare and Medicaid and when Medicaid might be a viable option. And elder law attorneys are the people you want to talk to if you want to or have someone that may need Medicaid. Elder law attorneys are specialists in disability and benefit planning. And becoming eligible for Medicaid can happen fairly rapidly. Life insurance. Talk about life insurance real quick. Most of us in this audience today don't need life insurance. Life insurance is generally intended to replace an income stream to take care of survivors. So for example, if I were younger and when my kids were younger and I was working and making an income that supported the caregiving and the work that the support that my kids needed, I needed life insurance and I had term life insurance. But today my kids are adults, they're self-sufficient. There isn't anyone at my death that really needs to have income replacement. Whole life is very expensive and it's not an investment. Kind of like the long-term care. You can, in most instances, self-insure. So if you don't have beneficiaries that need your income replaced at your death, there's no need for any whole or variable life. Annuities. Now, I could talk a long time about annuities, but in my opinion, again, I'm just here with my opinion. I'm not here to give legal or financial advice. It's just from my experience. Annuities are also heavily marketed to our demographics. They're sold under the guise of being guaranteed or tax-free. And the truth of the matter is they are very expensive. The average commission for the sale of an annuity is almost 10%. So that's why you're always hearing people trying to sell them. It's one of the first things, again, it's late night television. You're going to see annuities being marketed to you. They're very expensive. And again, if you, let's say, buy a $100,000 annuity, you hand them $100,000, what do you think they're going to do with that $100,000? They're going to invest it. They're going to invest it in stocks and bonds and real estate. So why don't you just take that $100,000 and invest it? Find an investment advisor that has a fiduciary duty, that has you as their best interest, and you're going to do just fine. You don't need to give it to an insurance company who's then going to invest it and make 8 to 10 to 12% and guarantee you 4%. That doesn't sound like a good deal to me. Taxes are also not they aren't tax free. In fact, at the death of the annuitant, the taxes are then passed on to the people who inherit the annuity. So be very careful with annuities. They're fraught with commissions, expenses, penalties, and they make them very complex. So they're kind of hard to break down and understand the advantages and disadvantages, which should be a red flag. Remember, there's only 5 things that you can invest in. So just make that clean shot and invest it in your own name. An option, many people want annuities because they feel like it gives them comfort. They don't have to worry, but you're really not doing yourselves any favors about inflation. So some options to annuities would be either getting a laddered sort of portfolio of CDs, or you can get a laddered portfolio of treasuries or bonds. And those are much more safe investments. Prepaid funerals. Not a big fan of prepaid funerals. My experience has been that when you sit down to decide your funeral, very often you're going to overbuy. You're going to buy more than what at the end of the day you really want. People's ideas about funerals have changed so much over the last, even just 10 years. Same thing with weddings. People are getting away from what we have traditionally thought of as these big, expensive events. Funerals are in that same category. So be careful about buying or purchasing too big or too much of a ceremony and bells and whistles, because my guess is at the end of the day, that's not going to get utilized. Very often the prepaid, there's always going to be extra fees because, oh, well, the company got bought or sold. Now we have this other additional cost. And now we don't do that anymore. We have to charge for this other thing. And they usually don't really work as you might have imagined. Prepaid cremations are not a bad idea. Again, you can get very modest cremations. And then your family can then augment your ceremony or memorial with other things at the time that's more appropriate to what would be appropriate at that time. Jointly held accounts. This is a really, really important issue. I'm going to ask everybody out there, how many people have an account that's jointly titled with someone other than their spouse? Okay. There's probably a lot of you. And that is very dangerous. A lot of people will say, oh, my daughter, she lives in Atlanta. I live here. I just made it easier for her. I'm going to just put her on my account so she can pay my bills if she ever needs to. And I know she's going to share it with the other children at my death. Okay, that never happens. Number one, the risk involved. If your daughter who lives in Atlanta happens to get into a car accident, she may run over a 30-year-old with 2 kids. That accident, that litigation is going to take your account and put it in that litigation at risk because she's now an owner of that account. So when she gets sued for that accident, there goes your bank account. That's why you want to have just a power of attorney. Again, power of attorneys are awesome, super important, super powerful, but everybody needs one. And again, last month's Aging Academy, we talked about demystifying estate planning, and we talked about power of attorney. So super important. All you need to do is name your daughter as your power of attorney. That way she can get access to your bank account if she needs to write checks, but she's not an owner, okay? So make sure that you keep all your accounts in just your name alone. And that power of attorney or that daughter or that son that you want to have authority can be accomplished through a power of attorney. Now, my last subject that I want to talk about. And then we've got some room. I've seen a lot of questions coming up that I haven't been able to watch. So we've got some time to review those. But the last thing I want to talk about, two things really. One is sometimes we want to decide whether we want to rent or own. We get to the age where, I'm tired of taking care of my house. Maybe it'd be just easier to rent. That way I don't have to worry about all the maintenance and the pain in the neck of owning a home. But I want you to think about that very carefully, because if you look at your budget, and I'm sure everybody out there has a budget, right? So if you look at your budget, very often your expense line item for housing is one of your most expensive line items. So make sure that you don't get into a rental situation because you can't control that. Every year, your rent will probably go up. And if you're in a condominium situation, your HOA fees are going to go up. So it's a line item of your budget that you're not going to really be able to control over the long term. So if you're able to pick between ownership or rental, my recommendation is to always stick with ownership versus renting. So now I'm going to take a moment and remind you of our next episode, which will be next month. And we're going to talk about some of your biggest financial and estate planning fears, three biggest fears. And with that, I want to go ahead and I'm going to try to be quiet and hear some of your questions and hopefully try to answer some of them. Let's see.
All right. Let's see here. And just to clarify, Darby, POD, can you clarify what POD means on your account?
I forgot to say that. Yes. POD means pay on death. Same thing as TOD, transfer on death. That means that at your death, the account just goes automatically to whomever you've named. And there are times and places where those are appropriate, and there are times and places where those are not appropriate. So I want to be careful. And again, the estate planning session last month, we talked about that, I think, a little more in depth.
So definitely check that one out, because the next question was if there's any risk in having that on your account. So go ahead.
Well, there is a little bit of a risk. I mean, that's a little bit challenging to answer that question in isolation like that. But if you have a variety of family members, it could be a risk. If you have all your accounts, POD, TOD, that could be a risk because you're leaving your estate bankrupt with no funds to be able to pay your bills or pay your taxes. So that POD, TOD is kind of a symptom of this desire to avoid probate, which is a false desire. So I would be very careful about your POD or TOD. That's what a simple will is for. Your will can just say, I want to give it to these people. And that way you only have to worry about changing your will if you change your mind instead of worrying about all the PODs and TODs you have out there. So I hope that answers that question. But that is a good question, and it can get complicated. So, and again, if you all have further questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
So let's see here. This one. What happens at the end of the term of a fixed annuity?
Well, it depends. There are a lot of different kinds of annuities. I mean, annuity contracts can get very complicated and very different. So you would have to read that little tissue paper contract that you get, what happens at the end. And it's not necessarily always a happy ending. The taxes are sometimes due, and it depends on who you've named as the beneficiary to inherit, or if there even is a death benefit. So I can't really answer that in any detail, honestly.
That one's pretty hard. It depends on the different annuities. Let's see here. September class. It's always on the our monthly AARPs. When is our next one, Darby?
Thursday, September 19th. It's always live on the third Thursday of each month. And we're going to be sharing a link in the chat as well as in the post-event email with a link to the calendar. So you can register for all of them. We have one coming up in September and another in October.
Thank you. You were much quicker on the calendar there for me.
Well, here's someone
There's,
that's saying they're being pressured by a family member to get an annuity.
yeah.
Um, I think I've talked about the annuities and whoever it is that's telling you not to do it, I would stay on their side. Annuities are not appropriate in most instances. So whoever is telling you it's not a good choice, they're right. And if you need ammunition to say no, have your financial advisor tell them no. And again, if you've got the right financial advisor, they would not be trying to sell you an annuity.
And Ingrid asked about reverse mortgages. Ingrid, rewatch this episode. We covered it earlier in the program, the pros and cons of the reverse mortgages. Well, really the cons of them.
Oh, and here's a good question. Mary Morrison is asking, are fiduciaries licensed? A fiduciary duty is created by law. It's a relationship. Like, for example, the bus driver has a fiduciary duty to the people in the bus, right? It's not a license that creates the fiduciary duty so much as the law creates it. So the fiduciary duty of an investment advisor can be varied. Like we talked about, you've got the best interest or you've got the suitability standard. And you want to reach out and find an investment advisor that has that best interest standard. That makes sense. Oh, there. Oh, Michelle, you answered it. I'm sorry.
It's always good to answer it. And I think Michelle answered this one. I'm the joint owner of my son's account. What's the downside of that?
I think we covered that one, right?
Risk.
Joint ownership is just dangerous. It's always better just to utilize a power of attorney, and it's a much cleaner and much more appropriate way to have authority over another person's account.
This one's a little off topic from today, but someone asked, my mom's husband passed away and she received a check payable to his estate of, but we don't have an estate account open anywhere. Her bank wouldn't do it without an estate account for him being opened. Is that
That's
that
a
is?
problem. Yep, that
Yep.
would be a problem. You do have to open up an estate in order to transact that check. Now, here, a quick little aside here. Sometimes you don't want to open up an estate. I'll give you an example. Let's say a gentleman passed away in a car accident, and he was the cause of the car accident, and it also caused other damages at his death. And he only had creditors. I mean, he had no real assets of any kind, of any importance. But now there's this big fat lawsuit, right? And this big fat lawsuit wants to sue him and his insurance carrier in order to get the money to pay for for his causing of the accident. Well, whoever opens that estate just put a flag up in the air saying, "Hi, I want to be responsible for all the debts of this estate." Um, and then that personal representative is going to have to manage that lawsuit and litigation and everything. So sometimes there's a reason not to open up an estate. I mean, if all there is a big hole of creditors, don't open that estate. When you're a personal representative, you are personally responsible for that estate. So in your question, it would really depend on how many other assets are out there. You know, does he have other assets? Does he have a lot of debt? But if it's worth it, open up the estate so you can transact the check. That makes sense. And don't forget to file a tax return if there's one due. And I've got a couple questions here about, hey, I'm already invested. I already have annuities.
Yeah.
What do we do? You want to talk to a financial advisor that has a fiduciary duty to you. I would not go back to the person who sold them to you. I would find a new financial advisor and ask what the risks are, because my guess is that there will be penalties and taxes due if you terminate any annuities. And they're kind of counting on that. You know, they make a lot of money off people that want to terminate or stop an annuity. So don't do anything with them without talking to someone who can give you some good advice. And you want to talk to like a trust department, trust officer, wealth managers at RIAs, registered investment advisories. There are lots of ways to find them. And you can go to the FINRA website. We gave you that, the broker check, and you can find lists of those investment advisors who do have that fiduciary duty. But it typically is not a broker. Well, it isn't.
And I think you answered it also then for D. She said, I have several annuities that have reached their surrender period. Should I roll the funds into another type of investment? Definitely talk to an investment professional there.
Okay, here, Marilyn's asking a good question. Can I have more than one power of attorney? I would not recommend that because it could get confusing. And you can name more than one person at the same time. You can have co-personal representatives. I don't recommend that either because, you know, one might be on vacation somewhere and the other one might not be. And so if you need both people to sign a check or be at the bank, that gets a little impractical. And if you have, I'm a power of attorney down here and another power of attorney is up in Atlanta, it could just get confusing. So I'm not sure what the purpose of that would be, to be honest.
Is investing cash in treasuries, bills, safer / better than bank CDs because there's no limit as banks have the 250,000 FDIC insurance?
I would say yes.
I like it. Hannah found a financial advisor who is with an RIA and is a CFP fiduciary. Do I have to ask them if they work in your best interest or as a suitability standard?
I would ask just for your own, and they'll be happy to answer it. And they should be happy to answer it, actually. Here's a question about continuing care communities. I totally talked about those in the episode of Don't Put Me in One of Those Places. So go back and look at that episode, Marilyn, and you'll hear I'm not in favor of continuing care communities at all, unless you can rent monthly as opposed to buying in, because you may end up not liking it there. You may not like their macaroni and cheese or their salads and you want to leave, but you're stuck there. The silly answer, but go back and read that, watch that episode if you can.
And can you say again what was an RIA?
A registered investment advisory.
And a CFP.
The best and the best is the CFA, which is called a chartered financial analyst. Chartered financial analyst. So very often at a trust department or at a wealth management office of some kind, you'll find, if you go and look at their website, there should be somebody there that's a CFA. That's the pilot of the plane, okay? You're going to be working with the stewardesses out there. You're going to be talking to the stewardesses about your tax impact or cash flow or your TOD or your annuities, but it's the pilot up there that's going to be managing those portfolios, and that should be a CFA. So that is also a good question. Who is the CFA on staff, or where do they get their information?
Thank you. Lots of good questions. We reposted the links, and if anyone is still missing those, we will be sending them in the follow-up email that'll go out later today with a wonderful survey for everyone. There's a little bit of discussion about reverse mortgages. Someone had an opinion. Not all annuities are problematic. Some are good for income production. There's just a lot of our friends have a lot of experience as well in their world. Darby, do you have any closing thoughts for us before we?
Gosh, these questions are all so good. And I really appreciate you all. And I appreciate you all and all your positive feedback that I'm getting. And I'm glad that I'm apparently resonating with a lot of people, and I want to continue to do so. So please let the AARP know that you appreciate this session so that we can keep this up and they'll keep their sponsorship up. And let me know if there's anything specific you'd like for me to elaborate on again. I'm already working on next year's schedule and topics. And again, email me, agingacademy.com, email Michelle. We're here to help you. We want to build a network. We want you all to feel connected and informed and be safe out there. Okay.